Well, hey there team, and welcome back to the channel, and welcome to my review of The Last Faith. This is all very off the cuff. That is my shtick, in that I'm a reluctant reviewer. I don't relate so much to a lot of the review space these days, how it's more interested in being sort of flowery essays. I'm just a dude who plays games, and I want to share my, well, off the cuff opinion with you guys. The only real objective metric that I use is a dollar value kind of system. For me, it's 5 to 1. So if I give the game $5, for example, I expect that it gives me an hour of solid gameplay back. Now, this game is actually retailing in that AA lower indie space, $41.99 Australian, 42 bucks. We'll call that about 8.5 hours, which I've put in. Objectively, worth your time, worth your money. It's not going to be for everyone. It was a bit of a slow start, and in fact, I would go so far as to say I didn't really like it when I started, but this is part of why I want to do these kind of, we'll call them reviews, right? That's what they are, but this is why I want to give more time to games. Traditionally, I've done overviews for years, where I play like 30 minutes. I'm pretty much a tutorial channel accidentally, but you can only give so much time if you want to cover a variety of games. So I think if I only gave this 30 minutes, I probably would have bounced off it. But it got its claws in me, and over time, I was thinking about it a lot when I wasn't playing it. I really have enjoyed this game immensely, but like I said, it does its best not to sell itself very well. Now, I took a moment to actually have a think about it. I was like, there is something kind of wrong with this game, yet I love it, and I think it will be a cult bit of a sensation, right? It's probably not going to get a whole lot of momentum. For my part, you know, you should try it, but, you know, here are the caveats. Here are my thoughts. I think at first blush, people would want to try and call it like a Souls-like meets Castlevania, and I suppose in some respects it is that. I'm not a huge Castlevania, Metroidvania type of guy, but I should be. I actually really should be, because the few that I've played, Ori in the Blind Forest comes to mind. I love it. It's one of my favorite games of all time. I go back to it often, and there is that DNA, that Capcom DNA, because I love Resident Evil games, especially the old ones where you will explore a mansion. There's a lot of back and forth, you know, you got to come back for the diamond key, and level design, some people pay it off, but being able to design the same space that you traverse back and forth over 10, 20 hours is a phenomenal skill, which is kind of lost in a lot of modern games. Anyway, any excuse to talk about Resident Evil. So while I do have that blind spot, Metroidvanias, they have that same sort of back and forth power-ups that will unlock more of the level and retreading and retracking. And this game has that part of those games, whatever you want to call them, right? That shared ancestry of those kind of genres. Though it's definitely not like an actual Metroid type game, and it's not a survival horror, it's a Souls-like. I don't mean to disparage, but the correct term would be it has taken the Souls mechanic and copy-pasted it onto this 2D Metroidvania setting that I just covered then. And I choose those words specifically because I feel like there is a pseudo-genre here, but it needs more room to breathe, and it needs more innovation. Don't get me wrong, I really did enjoy it, and I'm aware of other games in the space that have done similar things. I think Blasphemous, which I've barely played, I'll put it on the list, I'll go back to it, but even things like Salt and Sanctuary and all that. So this is not the first game to have a shot at it, and I wonder if those games are also plagued by the similar problems that this one has. The only way I'd know is, well, if you comment, or maybe I'll go back and have a look at them, because I thoroughly enjoyed my time, but it feels more like a proof of concept in a burgeoning new genre. What I'm really getting at is the Souls-like genre is kind of fully realized and fleshed out, to the point where you have something like Lords of the Fallen come out, which is actually a really good game, but you can get really nitpicky and critical about what it's not doing and what hasn't been iterated on very well, because the foundations of that genre, of that space that it's working in, are already pretty well established. But then if you just go and take all of those sensibilities and then you put them into a totally different perspective, game, whatever you would like to call it, genre even, setting, this 2D side-scroller, it buckles under the weight of a lot of what makes a Souls-like, which is ostensibly a third-person action RPG sort of adventure type game. It really doesn't translate as well as it could. I know this might seem a little bit facetious, but an extreme example, if you're not getting what I'm putting down, would be like trying to take everything about a first-person shooter and then putting it into a racing sim. Like, it doesn't really work. Some of it'll work, but it's not made that way. And that's, on a smaller scale, that's what seems to be going on here. Probably the strongest concept that you could get your head around, even just by looking and not playing it, is the space that you have to work in, right? It's not like you have a right thumbstick, aim, gunshot, or anything like that. You can probably see all the attacks are on the horizontal plane. So anything that gets sort of aerial above you in the Z-axis, you can't really shoot, you can't really aim at. You do have Castlevania type spells that you can throw, like a looping axe kind of thing. However, because this is a Souls-like game, chances are you're not using it, you don't have that equipped, you haven't leveled up the insight or whatever the skill is that dictates the damage scaling for that. So it's trying to take what is essentially arcadey mechanics designed to fix that problem, like in Castlevania, and trying to hit things that sit outside of your character's swing. But because it's decided to be a Souls-like, you're not going to have that ability in your skill set. Not really. And even if you did switch it out, it's going to be dog shit and do no damage because of the RPG Souls scaling mechanic. You've probably already put 70 strength in, you know, because you're using the greatsword. I think you're getting the point, right? That these are design principles not designed for what this genre is attempting to be, and it doesn't really work. Another one is, you know, iframes, timings, that sort of stuff. This is really big. Dodging, avoiding, and watching attack animations is a big part of a Souls-like game. But I would argue you have another entire Cartesian plane. You have the Y-axis, if you want to think of it that way, that you can move in. You can strafe left and right, and you can move forward and backwards. Don't worry about Z going up and down, right? But you can dodge and you can sidestep and try and get around dudes. It doesn't work here because you only really have one axis that you can move back and forward along. You can't roll into the game or out of it. It's not like 2.5D or whatever they call it. And so it works sometimes, and they've done the best that they can. But again, my point is, because they've taken a lot of the sensibilities, just copy-paste whole cloth, the way that scaling, statistics works, and then they've put the exact same mechanics in, but they haven't really taken the time to adapt the mechanics to this particular genre, makes it unpleasant at times. And sure, you could call it cope, but the problem is when you start to see glaring gameplay designs in what is essentially them trying to adapt one genre into something else, and then you die, you start to get a bit butthurt. Was it actually get good, or was it a problem with the game? Time will tell, I suppose. They're doing the same bloody Dark Souls storytelling where they drip feed you in from, I don't know what's going on, right? It's like some sort of vampire thing, which I like the theme. People are probably going to think of Bloodborne. I think of things like the ghoul sub-faction from Warhammer vampire counts, right? It's that much more ghoulish vampirism, and you're seeing these dudes get infected kind of like a zombie outbreak, like a Resident Evil, but they're going in the vampire ghoul direction. It's kind of cool. I like it. But yeah, the story, it's hard to give a shit when you're starting to get fatigued from a genre trope. We've seen it before with zombies, and if you're older like me, like World War II games, you know, all these things that were just getting released by everyone all the time, and your eyes just started to glaze over. And I feel it's the same way with the novel storytelling technique that From Software's done with their games. And to be honest, I wish Dark Souls games, no, I wish Souls-like games that are copying FromSoft would just stop doing that. Tell a story your own way. Stop copying them with this little bits of lore all over the place. You know, like I said, it was novel once, and FromSoft can get away with it, but I kind of wish people would stop doing it because it just makes me roll my eyes, and I don't really give a shit about the story. So look, thematically and all that, it's all very cool. What's going on? I don't know, man. Even after 9 hours, I have no idea what's going on. But that doesn't really matter that much because the bosses are fun, there's a lot of spectacle. It is, at times, hard, but in the right way and challenging. Other times, and again, this is limited by, you have to go back to whatever, bonfire equivalents, which has a really cool safe room song, by the way. The music in this is brilliant. Don't get distracted, Scarlet. But the idea that you have to cash your souls in and all that, again, just copied out. They didn't come up with something new or interesting or specific to this setting. And the problem, because you're not moving around a 3D space, it's a 2D space, you will end up, as the game gets on further and further, and part of me kind of dreads later into the end game past where I am, because it's already pretty fucked, that you are essentially getting squeezed through a gauntlet. You feel like meat through the frigging sausage machine, and it pushes you further and further with more and more dudes, and you just don't have that extra room for mobility or exploration or anything like that. You kind of just have to go down. Ultimately, you're just fighting down corridors, and then you're gonna die at some point, and you have to do that whole gauntlet again to get your souls back. What are you complaining about, Scarlet? Well, ultimately, it's doing the corpse run for souls, which we've come to expect from Souls games, but because of the, how would you call it? It's not logistic. It's like a Cartesian constraint, because you're working in one less plane of movement. Does that make sense? You've got less space to maneuver in, and so the way that the levels are designed become elongated and start crossing over from challenge into cruelty. Anyway, look, I find that it sounds like I'm bashing the game. Again, I warmed up to it, but I really did enjoy my time with it. I really did, actually. There was I just beat a really tough boss, and that was quite satisfying to get through. The voice acting, at first, if you ask me in the first hour, I'd say it's terrible. It's all over the place. The first chick, the bonfire lady, I don't know what you want to call her, but the lady at the bonfire, because there's always a lady at the bonfire. I don't know what their direction with her voice acting was, or if they just Yoko Ono'd her into the project, but she is fucking terrible. I don't want to hear a word from her. But literally every other character I've come across, probably 10 more different characters, they are top notch. They're chewing up the scenery and, yelling and screaming and getting into it. And the main character's got a really sexy Geralt adjacent voice. So like 9 out of 10 of the voice actors are great. It just so happens that the first one they put in your path sounds like she absolutely phoned it in. Anyway, look, I haven't looked into it, but I wouldn't be surprised if this game gets criticism. It's asking for precise platforming, and yet it's bringing janky, imprecise controls, which are the hallmark of a Souls-like. I think the first thing people will usually admit to when playing a Dark Souls game is the clunky precision of timing in the duels, in the interplay, in the combat loop is where the magic's at. And the fucking worst part of any Souls-like game ever is the platforming. It's always shit. It's always clunky. It doesn't work, and I don't think that's sacrilege to say that. Most people will probably agree with me. And the problem with this sort of genre, a Castlevania or a Metroidvania, whatever you want to call them, they're really big on platforming. And so, again, another example, there is a design problem underpinning this, in that they're trying to kind of put a square block in a round hole. So this could be a frustrating experience for people, so buyer beware. However, if you can get over that hurdle, there's a really cool world with great music, audio, voices, art, everything, all the little execution animations, that sort of stuff. But just beware, this is more of an experimental Souls-like than it is an actual Metroidvania type game. I hope that makes sense. Anyway, might just leave it there for the time being. I'll catch you guys on the next one.